I'm delighted to be joined today by Emad Ansari. Thank you very much, Emad, for giving up your time to speak with us. I wonder if I can start by taking you right back before the time you were even at the AIRE Centre and ask you if you remember what got you interested in law in the first place.
I think the clarity of why I came to law, and certainly I'm sure it's the same for many other people, of why we come to the law comes afterwards. At the time, it was just kind of a feeling of maybe this is the right path. But I think in hindsight, after having been also a law professor and like telling people, advising people and making sure they're in the right place, it was mostly, I think, a love of language. That there is a, precision with which one must express oneself, and to account for all the various interpretations that people could make of what you say and what you write. That was always, something that has been something I've enjoyed, whether it's like, writing outside of the law, writing in the law. I remember this one experience at law school where we were being taught by this judge, a former judge from the ICJ, I believe, and it was a special experience. And he was just, some people found him too almost pedantic, where he would take you through the statute and focus on every single word and placement of commas. Mm-hmm. But I just absolutely loved it. I mean, it was just, to work with such meticulousness. It was almost a task of an architect or, an engineer in some ways.
That's really interesting. And your law school was in the United States, is that right?
That's right.
Was it in Michigan?
Mm-hmm. Michigan Law School.
And was it there that you came across the AIRE Centre, or how did you first hear of the AIRE Centre?
Yeah, I don't know if this still exists, but there was a special kind of relationship with the University of Michigan. And when I was there for my first year, I did a double degree where I did a master's in public policy, and then I moved into the law school and completed both degrees at the same time. So my second year in the program, but my first in the law school, we were thinking about what to do for our summer internship, and we heard that this woman was coming from the AIRE Centre, and it was Nuala Mole, and that we could interview with her, we could meet with her, and so I just met with her and just found her to be really inspiring, and then was selected for the internship. And so there were every year there were two people selected from Michigan who would come to the AIRE Centre for that summer. Me and another person, and then there had been other people who were ahead of me who had been there, and I asked them, and they only had great things to say. And for me, it became a really formative experience.
That's great. And so, and when you think back to your time when you were interning at the AIRE Centre, were there any particular cases or projects that you work on that really stand out for you now, or perhaps a particularly formative experience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was thinking about it this morning before, just jogging the memory. But I think subconsciously also I wanted to have this conversation to kind of process some of the things that might still be lingering. And there were a few. I mean, one was, as a caseworker, you just inherited both an email that belonged to someone who was in your place before, but then a host of cases, files that were incomplete that would just be handed down to the next person. One of them was this file that had hung around for a long time. It was this person who had first contacted the AIRE Centre from Eastern Europe. They had come to the US, to the UK, and had been living in really poor conditions and had not received any help, and had then, not gotten back in touch with us. We had tried to contact them. They had been missing, but while I was there, the case, that client came back, and we got the chance to finally close out that file. And it was really special because we actually got to meet them and help them go to the tribunal and help them kind of get us the assistance that they needed. It was really, they had suffered some terrible living experiences, at the hands of bad tenants, at the hands of people who were taking advantage of their migrant status. And I kind of remember this client being so grateful that my supervisor at the time was Sarah St. Vincent, who since became a mentor. but we kind of took her hand and kissed it because he was just so grateful for the assistance that the AIRE Centre could provide. I think Sarah was taken aback because she just didn't expect someone to have that reaction. The other case, which was really special, stands out in the memory, was this filing from Norway, I believe. It was about 200 asylum seekers who had been denied status. And we had a point of contact there. And these asylum seekers were just, had handwritten their stories on, random pieces of paper. And those came to us, were mailed to us. And we were just, as caseworkers, we had a whole a raft of us just kind of deciphering this handwriting and plugging in the language and trying to think about what kind of legal arguments we could make. Really special in terms of bridging. I think the asylum seekers were from East Africa. I think we were, it was just a bridging of geographies that was just incredible. And I think sorry to take a long time with this question.
No, it's really interesting.
The most, something that affected me most from that time was, it was about 5 p.m. one day. I was the last one closing out the office or that attic in which all our caseworkers were kind of their special place. And I got this phone call, which I picked up, and it was, a woman who was crying. Her brother had been deported or was in the process of being deported. And the more kind of she told me about that case, it was just, almost like looking into a parallel life, because this brother of hers was exactly my age, had, in a different life, it could have been me. I mean, he was from a country that was formerly a colony, and he had been brought to the UK at a very early age, probably as a baby, if not an infant, and had just never had a status regularized. Mm-hmm. And there are many things in which, many ways in which he could have been helped, and he wasn't. And at every kind of barrier, at every kind of stage where he got into trouble with the law, his encounter with the government, his encounter with the law made it worse. And eventually he developed, mental health illnesses and got into low-level trouble, nothing really that big. But eventually, just because his status wasn't regularized, there were immigration proceedings, deportation proceedings opened up against him. And we tried, it was at such a late stage that the sister contacted us that I don't think the AIRE Centre could really have helped. But I think Adam Weiss at the time, who was one of our supervisors, tried. But this person was deported. And I think just the sheer unfairness of the whole situation just, stuck with me for a very long time.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. So after your time at the AIRE Centre, I know that your sort of most recent role was as an assistant professor at a university in Pakistan. But I wonder if the road from the AIRE Centre to university teaching was a sort of straight line, or whether there were stop-offs on the way.
In many ways, it was. I mean, in my first year of the master's program of public policy, I'd gotten really interested in human rights issues. Had some mentors, who had witnessed apartheid in South Africa. I had mentors who had worked with Amnesty International and so on. And so I knew that was a path that I wanted to go into, not necessarily the corporate route. And so coming to the AIRE Centre, I wasn't quite sure, however, whether it would be direct legal services, what level of work in the human rights sphere, public interest sphere I wanted to work. And I think this case that I told you about, the last one, I think made me want to explore more of, what are the root causes of the stuff that people at the AIRE Centre are dealing with, because this work was amazing. I mean, the AIRE Centre's put us in a position of responsibility at a very early age, at a very early stage of our legal careers. Mm-hmm. But it felt sometimes as though we were just putting out fires. And I think that it feels like the case for many people who are working on the front lines of legal cases, who are direct service providers. I think I wanted to explore after that what are the push factors that are contributing to refugee crises? What are the factors that have created the conditions historically that have led to the present day kind of injustices that led to the deportation of this young man, and it could have been avoided. So, in some ways, the trajectory to being an academic or a researcher was a straight line. In some ways, it took a meandering path because afterwards, I then was a fellow at Human Rights Watch in DC. I was a board member at Amnesty International USA, and I saw and I was able to place myself in various positions within the human rights industry, which it kind of sometimes is, and then come to a point where I said, okay, well, maybe I just need to do some research on my own, take some time to think, teach about it. It's an ongoing journey.